going to start the game running, is that I've known Rob and Jose for many years, and in fact, 25 odd years. But then again, it can't be, because Rob and Jose are only 25 now, so maybe it's a bit less.
Yeah, right.
Good morning, Simon. It's good to see you. Monday, Louise, great to see you guys. And this morning's discussion, for me, it's at my heart. It's an incredibly important discussion, and I'll give you insight into why for me. Many years ago, it's no secret, I told the story, I've written a book about it. I lost everything that I had. And of course, what I didn't have at that time is an effective business structure that would allow me to, of course, protect all my assets and everything around me. And after that, I got to meet the gurus from iProtect, and for 25 odd years, I've been working closely with them, and I know that they've helped many, many people to structure their businesses in a way that's going to protect them and their families, which we're going to get into in a few moments. So, we don't like talking about the negative side of life, but things happen. I talk a lot about failure and hitting obstacles in life. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, failure is imminent. No one I know out there around the world who's become super successful hasn't failed at 1 point or 2 points or 3 points on their route. So guys, it can happen. And if you're not failing, you're obviously not moving towards success. And when you start failing in life, it means, I don't like that word failure. I wish you could find another word for it. I like to call it obstacles en route, because that's exactly what it is. There's no perfect curve to the top. So guys, let's get into it. And I just want to say to Rob Velosa and Giselle Delgado, it's a privilege having you guys. So what I'm going to do is that, first of all, big welcome to you guys. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for listening.
So what I want to ask, I know who iProtect is, and I would imagine there's someone in the audience who also knows who you guys are. But if you don't mind, Jose, if you can give me an insight, and a brief insight, who is iProtect?
Okay, Mike, here's our elevator pitch in essence. So iProtect is a group comprised of companies that assist business owners in three fundamental things. You already touched on the first one, and obviously we can elaborate more during the course of our discussion here. But objective one is to make a business owner financially bulletproof, because as you said, people are going to fail. We've got pandemics you didn't see coming. Markets change. There's disruptive technologies that change businesses. So you don't know what's going to happen. Along the way, you're going to fail. So what we want to do is make people bulletproof financially, sort all their assets out into structures, which also gives them this peace of mind that if they do move forward and they do fail, they've got nothing to lose, because whatever you've built up is secure in structures. Failing which, it's like building a castle on sand. It's crazy. When you're talking about wealth or accumulating assets, etc., if you don't secure them, anything can happen. You can lose them. So that's objective number one. Set up structures to secure your assets, secure your business, secure your wealth. Then secondly, if business hasn't worked out yet, SARS is your business partner. Okay, now the law says you must pay tax, but the law doesn't say that you must pay more than you should. And we often see business owners voluntarily paying too much tax, which is almost criminal in my view. So yes, we pay our taxes, but only what the law says. So we help business owners create very tax efficient structures to ensure that you only pay what the law says you must. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Then thirdly, I don't know anybody who's immortal. Everybody is going to die at some point. And people just fail to plan for this event. And the consequences are absolutely catastrophic. We see estates frozen, sold. We see people just facing absolute hardships and losing about 30 to 40% of everything they've built up over the course of their life. And it's just insane. So in getting people to own nothing, because that's really our objective, you own nothing on the event of your death. There's nothing to freeze, no taxes, no duties, and that type of thing. So fundamentally, those are the three objectives. Financially bulletproof, pay only the tax you must, be as efficient as possible. On your demise, you've got a proper succession plan. But then what iProtect does differently to other groups and organizations is, besides working on a fixed fee, which is a crazy number there, we work on fixed fees, but we actually help people to implement it. Because what we often see is people have all these wonderful structures and they don't implement them. So we have a number of companies in our group that will help clients to execute the plan. And that is absolutely vital. Failing which, you waste your time. You've got companies and trusts, and it's just sitting in a cupboard and not being utilized. So that's literally what iProtect does, Mark.
Right. Now, of course, Rob, over to you. How do I protect my personal assets from my business?
Thank you, Mark. The very first thing you've got to do is basically, in a few words, not own the assets. And that's what commercial structures are about. We want to be able to have these assets, but not directly own them in our personal names. So the first step that one has to utilize is obviously create a trust. Now, we like to refer them to family trust. We obviously refer to them as personal asset trust. And a trust is nothing but like almost very similar to your CC or PDY Limited. It's an entity, but it's not a real legal entity comprising of various parties. But the main parties to that trust is these trustees, which you're one of them. And we'll talk about the independent trustee that you make decisions with. And then you participate as a beneficiary and other beneficiaries within the trust. But if the trust is correctly structured and correctly administered, unlike a CC or PDY Limited, if you ever get sued, then obviously these creditors, unlike a CC or PDY Limited, they can attach your membership interest, attach your shareholding of your PDY, take over your CC and PDY and everything in it. And like a trust, by being a trustee or a beneficiary or the founder of the trust, just because you get sued, you have no ownership rights. And therefore, these creditors can't just simply get into your trust and obviously attach the assets. So it's an entity wherein you participate within those entity as parties, but no one can really get into that trust and attach it with the assets in it. Now, obviously, as laws have evolved, the trust is the first step. And its main objective is to own the shares of a company, a PDY Limited. I like to call it a special purpose vehicle because it's very different to the PDY Limited that most of us trade through, because it's got this comprehensive memorandum of incorporation with a number of different classes of shares. We're all used to, and we all know about normal ordinary shares, which this trust will own 100%. But there are going to be different and other types of shares in this company. And one of the key ones, which we'll get into it as we're going along, I like to call them capitalization, almost like loan account shares, giving you the ability to put assets like monies and movables in there without creating a loan account, but having these specific type of protection type shares, causing your assets that you have now to evolve and go into this entity, being this trust-owned company, but not creating a loan account, which obviously we'll get to, is not tax efficient and obviously is attachable by creditors. So in summary, is that if you've got this trust-owned company, the trust owning the shares so no one can get into the company, and you participate as the director of that company, this company is going to acquire your current and future assets. And if you structure it right, involving your business, you're going to cause all future assets to be directly owned in this company and protected from day one, which we'll get into now. And then obviously we'll also get through, as we're going along today, the ability to able to get current assets in there tax efficiently and not creating things called loan accounts that creditors can attach. So in summary, it's basically getting the correct trust-owned company in place to own your current and future assets. And if you administer it right, you structure it right, and you follow these very good tantamount rules about how you get current and future assets into it, you can cause your current assets to be protected. The cardinal rule is to build these assets and enjoy them and be able to get to the monies and spend it, but never own it directly, and therefore achieving this personal asset protection.
But I've got some advice for you guys. You should change your company name to the Untouchables, because that's exactly what you're creating out there. So now on the other side, Jose, on the other side, how do I secure my business assets from any business threat?
Mike, as Rob alluded to earlier, the objective is to separate assets that you build up from the risk that your business may face. Okay, so from a personal perspective, we always say we want to get our clients to own nothing, so that if there ever is an issue, a divorce, a sequestration, a judgment, a creditor, financial vagary, that you own nothing, you've got nothing to lose. Similarly, for your business, you do the same thing. And a lot of people out there may have come across either as a debtor or a creditor, where they see that a business owns nothing. So how do you recover your claim against that person? Now, we're not in business to fail, but the bottom line is, why should a bank or a creditor take everything you built up in your business unnecessary because of something you didn't plan for? Okay, so that's not the point. We're not going to talk ethics or morality here. The bottom line is, if you trade, you set up an entity that owns no assets. So if it gets liquidated or the business gets sued, and it could be a crazy claim, maybe one of your employees has a collision and the insurance company doesn't pay out, and now suddenly your business has got this massive claim that you couldn't fathom. So it's not about that type of thing. Is it right? Is it wrong? You've got a business, there's no assets in there. You've got a separate structure that owns the assets and will lease the assets to the trading co. If there's ever an issue, the business that is being sued is secured. So that's how we sort out our structure. You have an entity that faces all the exposure. You've got other structures where all the good stuff, where all the assets and the value sits, and there's obviously arrangements. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. I know we're getting a lot of questions coming through, guys. If we don't get to answer them, I can assure you that we will attend to it, and Rob and Jose will attend to this after this event. So, but I know we're getting a couple of things coming through. Maybe some, just before I come to the next question, I've got a lot of papers around me because it's necessary, is that this sounds like a costly exercise. I know you're going to come to that, and I know for a fact over the years, it's not a costly exercise. It's what it costs if it doesn't get done properly, and that's kind of key. But it's not a costly exercise. I don't know if you want to quickly elaborate on that in a short statement.
Not at all, Mark. And that is exactly what it is. The model of iProtect was designed for the small business owner. Yes, in the past, one of the myths around these structures is that it's only for the extremely wealthy because they're the only ones that can afford it. And that's the difference. If you can just get attached to a group where it can cost you thousands of rands to create, and you can work on a fixed fee basis, where you know that if you do it right and have these monthly capped fees to run these structures from a trusteeship and an accounting point of view, it can become very, very cost effective for these SMEs. Our model is around the SME model. And as a result, if you can work on capped fees instead of these crazy percentages or per hourly rate fees, I think it can be very, very inexpensive. And I think anyone that wants to have these structures, and if it can be very cost effective but tax efficient, it's like saying, if I can save 50 Rand tax because of these structures, but it costs me 10 Rand, I'm still up. I mean, just because I've run it tax efficiently with these structures, if it must pay its own way. If it's going to pay its own way, it's not costing me anything. And even if it does cost me a little bit because I'm not really making good profits to justify the tax efficiencies, but it's still affordable, and I work on a monthly cap fee basis. And if you're attached to a group that is purely dealing with SMEs, to manage these costs can be very cost effective.
100%, and I can certainly expand on that, and 100%, Rob. Now, I've got a question here. All good and well. How do I move my assets without triggering CDT, VAT, transfer duty, recoupment tax, etc.?
Well, that's obviously the key. And I think that is what separates a good structure being working for you in practice. It's one thing having the structure, but having a group or the knowledge to be able to get your assets into the structure and the future ones is the key. Now, I always say that our best friend is a particular section in our tax act called Section 42 of the Income Tax Act, which for many years we've utilized to being able to be moving current assets in. Because the first question that comes up is, okay, that's wonderful, but how do I get my house in? I mean, if I've got a house and it's a few million rand and I'm going to pay a few 100,000 rand in transfer duties, and if it's grown in value and it's grown by more than 2 million rand because of our primary residence exemption, I've got capital gains tax. And then how do I get that in? What about my investments that have grown? I've got capital gains tax. And how do I get it in without it owing me money and creating loan accounts? And I've got this donation tax implications. So it's one thing having it, but it's another thing getting it in. The good news is that one of the key shares that is created within this asset company that is owned by your trust is what I like to call our Section 42 shares, our equity shares. And the basic principle is, and through our group and the various divisions, including our conveyancing division, is to be able to transfer the property in without transfer duties without capital gains tax. Yes, there might be a bit of conveyancing fees, but that's affordable thousands of rands to move my home. Now, can you imagine? And there's so few people that understand the logic of being able to move your investments and certain policy investments, and especially property, without any of these tax implications like VAT, transfer duties, and capital gains tax. And now it becomes cost effective to restructure my assets to get these benefits. And if I can get it in without these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rands in transfer duties and capital gains tax, it makes sense. And then and on top of it, if we get it in, which we'll cover later, becoming also tax efficient, being able to use monies of our business before the secondary tax of dividend tax to maintain these assets. Now assets have become cheaper. It's cost me very little to get it in, but I'm using good before dividend tax money of our business to maintain them, such as water, lights, levies. So suddenly I've increased my buying power. I've also increased the ability to have more available to run and maintain these assets. But it's cost me the ability of being able to put assets in very cost effectively. There might be a bit of legal fees, which is all affordable, but there's not the massive amount of transfer to capital gains. And that's the exciting part of it, that we can make use of these corporate rules and particular sections in our tax act to be able to move our assets into this company and have these shares being issued to us. It's almost like an asset for share swap, Mark. I'm taking my 5 million rand house, I'm putting it into this company. The company doesn't pay me 5 million rand, but it gives me and issues me these specific Section 42 shares valued at 5 million rand. I've actually swapped my house for these special type of shares in this company. And when I do that asset for share swap, the asset is now in the company. I have these specific type of shares in the company, but it's been moved over without the incurrence of this transfer duties and other forms of taxes. Now I've got the asset in there, I've got it secured, and I've got it part of a structure to receive those three benefits that obviously Jose said, making it tax efficient going forward, which will cover how that's done and paid by these profits of your business with that profits tax. It's now in a structure, not being part of your death. And the most important thing, we've now got the ability to protect our house, but it cost us thousands of rands instead of hundreds of thousands or millions because of not incurring these massive amounts of transfer duties and taxes.
Just a good question from Yaku coming through. He says, if I have an existing family trust owning a set of PTY limiteds, how do I convert to your model?
I'll take that, Mark. So I'm pleased to hear that Yaku has taken some steps in setting up a structure. What he has is a slight inefficiency, and Rob started to allude to that in his previous reply. So in our tax act, when a company declares a dividend to a trust, there's a 20% dividends tax. However, if a company declares a dividend to another South African company, there's zero dividends tax. So what Yaku needs to do is forward us his document, we'll set up a meeting. We can firstly review the trust to make sure that it is robust, because not all trusts are created equally. There's some really shabby ones out there, and there's some that are Rolls-Royce. Okay, now we want Yaku to have a Rolls-Royce trust so that it's tax efficient, robust in the event of a claim by a creditor. And then we can restructure his business to have the shares of the business not owned by the trust directly, but owned by an interposed holding company. Using the corporate rules, as Rob mentioned, there's no capital gains tax in achieving the restructure, just legal fees. So Yaku's structure will now look as follows. You'll have a trust that owns a holding company that owns the trading company. Just by having done that restructuring, Yaku now has an extra 20% to either pay down debt, to invest, or to buy other assets. And that's massive.
Right. Thank you for that. I think it was a good one. Just from a credibility perspective, off the cuff, how many trusts do you guys administer?
Oh, my goodness.
I'll ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, we've created over the last 25 years close to 40,000 trusts. But we're administering at the moment, from a trusteeship point of view, just over about 12,000 trusts we have under management, and in our accounting division, just over 3,000. So we administer about 12 and 3,000 respectively between the two divisions.
So our attendees are in pretty good hands. Thank you for that. Okay, here's another question coming through for you, Rob. I've heard that there are various means to legitimately pay only the legislated tax. How do I achieve this?
I think that is Jose's question, but I mean, I can get into it. Yes, there is a number of structures that you can utilize to save on tax. And like Jose alluded, is that you must elect to what you want to utilize in the Tax Act to make yourself tax efficient. And I just want to compare two things. Probably the worst taxpayers is individuals and even trusts. But one of the key relevant structures to make it very tax efficient is being a company. Now, all of us as business owners know this, or we just followed suit not knowing why, but that is why we have our business in a company. So we can make use of the corporate taxes of paying 28% tax and making profits. And the same applies to when you got assets in a company. And we are receiving dividends. I always say, can you imagine the fact that I have investments? I've worked hard to build these investments, and these investments make me money. I'm earning interest, but it's in my personal bank account, exposing it to my maximum 45% tax rate. Well, I could have had my savings in a bank account of the asset company, earning 28% tax. Then I've got investments that give me dividends. There is nothing worse when I see a share portfolio of shares and unit trusts held in a person's name, part of your death, exposed to creditors. But now when these investments are paying us dividends, they are taking the 20% dividend tax instead of it coming into your structure without the 20%. So you could have 100 shares of a listed company, I'll have 100 shares, you earn 80 Rand dividends, I earn 100 Rand dividends, which I now can reinvest again. So earning more dividends without the 20% dividend tax coming on your listed shares and your investments, giving you the ability to earn more when they're paying you dividends, to reinvest more, and the compounding effect is massive. But the biggest tax efficiency, there's no doubt, is that there are two big taxes to a business when you're making profits, which is the company tax at 28, but especially what Jose said, the 20% dividend tax. That is the key. At the end of the day, when you were making profits and a further 20% is taken off, where you could have avoided that by having a holding company trust structure to have the dividends being flowing into your structure without the 20% coming off, that is massive, because now you've increased your buying power by 20% towards the purchasing of assets. You've got an extra 20% to spend on the running cost of assets, like your home. It's now flowing into the structure, and this before dividend tax money is paying for water, lights, maid services, increasing your buying power and the spending on assets by a further 20%. So it's all about investment income taxation savings, not paying dividend tax, utilizing that towards assets and the spending of asset expenses, making your investments and your money is being exposed to the corporate tax rates instead of personal. And that is so important why a trust-owned company owns assets and your business to achieve these tax efficiencies of making use of South African registered companies and their taxes to achieve these benefits. Joe, I don't know if you want to add to that, since it was yours.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head. But Mark, if I can just really try and indelibly imprint this in all our attendees' minds, life is not a competition. However, I call it vanity salaries. If you work for a boss, you have no choice. They pay you, they take the PAYE. That's the end of the story. Okay, but if you're a business owner, you're in a unique position and the law allows you to do this, to plan your affairs. So what we come across on a daily basis is what I call a vanity salary. So I've drawn this big fat salary and I'm paying 45% tax, whereas your corporate rate is 28% tax. And if you're a SBC, it could be even a little bit less or lower, depending on what type of turnover and profitability you're generating. But one, as a business owner, should not be paying more than 28% tax overall, ideally.
Great. Another good one coming through, and I know this is imperative. How do I ensure my business survives my incapacitation or death?
That's your turn.
Okay, Mark. Yeah, very simply, again, people don't like to talk about death. It's not the greatest dinner topic, obviously, but it happens. And the problem is people don't plan for either their death, their incapacitation, and or sometimes their exit from their business. And what we see very often happens is, obviously, death is a shock, horror thing. What do we do now? we stuck with either sole proprietorship. We actually attending to an estate for an attorney who was a sole practitioner. It's an absolute disaster. So on the event of the death of a business owner, if you're a sole practitioner, that's absolute chaos, because now the business is frozen, and how do we deal with personnel and collecting debts and paying creditors and that type of thing. So hopefully all of your attendees today are not a sole practitioner. If they are, that's what we call business suicide. Or if you're in a partnership with another person, that's a suicide with a friend. Okay, so no partnerships, no sole proprietorship. But even if you have a CC or a company and the shares are not correctly structured, firstly, if you're living off the dividends, which are obviously tax inefficient, those dividends are going to be frozen. Cannot go to the family. There's hardships in that sense. The value of the equity, whether it be a member's interest or shares, is going to trigger capital gains tax at 18% just because you died. It's crazy. Okay. Whereas if the equity is structured, those shares are not in your name, effectively taking the business out of your name, meaning on your demise, there's no capital gains tax. So do you want to pay 0 or do you want to pay 18%? I mean, obviously, it's not even a question. Then we've got executors' fees that are going to be levied on the value of the equity. And that's also crazy. If you don't negotiate the fee, you're looking at a legislated maximum of 3.5% of the value of the shares. And if the executor's a VAT vendor, that's plus VAT, which brings it to 4%. So now you're sitting with somebody earning 4.025% of the value of your business just by shuffling a share certificate around. I mean, it's almost criminal. It's so parasitic. So if your business is structured, the shares are not in your name, no executors' fees. Okay, and I mean, that's massive. It's a saving of 4% on the gross value. Then we're looking at estate duty, and that's 20% on a net share value from 3.5 million to 50 million. And if your business is worth over 30 million, you're looking at 25%. I mean, that's horrendous. So again, you've taken the equity, you've structured it correctly, and now you do not have 20% or 25% estate duty. That's a massive saving. Then let's look at maybe a more positive situation where we're not talking about your death, but we're talking about your imminent retirement, or you're going to go and kick your feet up, you're selling your business. And this is where it gets really tricky, because people haven't planned. They end up sitting in front of us and going, look, we've got a big offer from Mr. Moneybags, and I've sold my members' interest, or I've sold my shares, only to find out that they're sitting with between a 18 to a 37.9% tax bill. Okay, and if you're doing your retirement or exiting, that can be a very large figure. So people don't plan for the exit. And if you set up structures, depending on the purchaser, depending on what type of business you have, you can in many cases exit and not pay any tax at all. Okay, so outside of setting up your structures or your business in a structure so that you can maximize the extraction of the revenue through 0 dividends and capping your income tax rate at 28, if you ever do sell out, okay, you can pay as little as 0, alternatively structure it so that you minimize the amount of tax you pay, and that the proceeds that you'll receive from your sale remain in a structure and not in your name.
Now, I've heard there are efficient ways of exiting my business on sale, retirement, or death. Can you touch on those?
I think Jose's covered on that now by talking about having the correct structures through whether holding companies. If you structure it correctly, you can definitely have and preempt the imminent way of getting out of a business due to your death and your partners buying you out, or when selling your business and having the correct structures to minimize the tax implications, like the eventual potential dividend tax. But there's no doubt that if you have the right structures versus just simply in your personal name or in a trust directly, but having the correct structures and the correct buy and sales or company buyback of shares involving your trust and holding company, you're going to do the best you can in law. It's all about doing everything within the ambit of law and limiting those multiple taxations. It's like what Jose said, Mike, is that we're in business to do 2 things. It's not a charitable organization. We want to make a success of it. We want to have a difference, make an impact in our economy and to the people around us. But let's be honest, this is here to make profits, and we're here to eventually unlock the value one day when we sell or when we die. Because you are going to cause a lifting of the value of your business one day selling to somebody or unlocking it because you have died and other parties are buying your business like your partners. And you've got to obviously structure yourself against the imminence of being in business to acquire profits tax efficiently without a secondary tax like dividend tax. And obviously allow that you can maximize rewards, that when you're exiting due to death or to a partner, that you've created the right structures to limit these multiple taxations. And the one thing that business owners take lightly, which maybe they're not paying it, is that the secondary tax of dividend tax on sales and on acquiring profits needs to be taken into account, because that is going to make the difference, and of that additional percentage of saving that, and the compounding effect of applying it to assets, and the compounding effect of more assets being acquired and the increased value of assets, the big difference long term of what you're going to eventually retire with, because the tax efficiencies is what make a big difference between two business owners earning and doing the same, but unlocking that value and having those monthly and annual profits tax efficiently to serious wealth, to just surviving and having a pot of wealth, which could have been a lot more just because it was structured correctly. And that's the whole point of this. And for me, it makes no sense that if you die losing a third of your assets, and by the time the third generation comes along, losing it all, and building a successful business, because we forget that our policies that we have, but especially the crazy valuation to business and losing about 40% of the value of business just because you have died, is what is going to completely liquidate everything eventually, just because of a death. But by selling and acquiring profits more tax efficiently and adding to that wealth and passing it on to your heirs without again losing a big percentage of these assets again that you've accumulated tax efficiently, is the key to this.
Now, what is the true cost of not having my affairs in order as a business owner on my death? CGT, executive fees, estate duty, liquidation of business, sale of business assets, and personal assets.
I think Joe, you're going to get covered. I think Jose and I have always utilized these two percentages. Work out about a third of your assets. Is that what will be lost? It all depends on the size of wealth and the type of assets, and it's grown. But a nice yardstick is about a third. When it comes to your business, because most businesses are acquired without a base cost on their shares, you can lose over 40% of the value of that business. Now, no one dies 1/3 liquid, Mike, and no business can afford about 40% of its value to be paid in cash when you die. And this is why great businesses are liquidated and closed down when they die. You're talking about liquidating this business to unlock about 40% of it in cash, which is impossible. So you lose the whole value of the business. And no one dies 1/3 liquid. It's very rare, no matter how much you plan, because and the older you get, no matter how much you can unlock on policies and everything else, it becomes a situation in the latter part of your life that you can never create that liquidity. And now that is an expensive thing to do, is to create liquidity to pay all those death costs. But if I can structure it right and not lose this a third, or save as much as I can of that third, and cause a continuity to the business without paying this 40% in estate duties, in capital gains tax, in security transfer taxes, in the cancellation of debt costs, and cancelling your bonds, and paying transfer costs on properties, and security transfer taxes. You can sit here, I'm running out of air. There's just multiples and multiple different taxes and costs on death. And then you suddenly don't have this liquidity. And now it's annihilation of these great hard-earned assets and businesses. And we do have a responsibility. We've got these successful businesses with multiple staffs, multiple families. We've got to be responsible that our family actually inherits this and earns from it. You could create wonderful plans that your key people take over a portion of this business. But these families and the jobs are secured. They carry on because you've structured your business. It's not going to be unlocked and liquidated. And now many people are affected, not only your own family, but everyone within that organization. These jobs are secured. Key people can now be part of it. And it just carries on. It's all about continuity. And the things called death or the vagaries and the risks of businesses does not now destroy many families and the ability to earn.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah. And of course, laws change all the time. I mean, I know that over the 25 years that I've known you guys, there's been some changes in law, and we've got to keep abreast of that. But a new law which abolishes interest-free loans to trusts and trust-owned companies.
Go for it, Joe.
Okay, yes, Mark, it's the continuous game of cat and mouse with Treasury. And of course, they're not happy to, as Rob mentioned, lose out on getting a big chunk out of you for a CGT when you die, or 20% or even 25% estate duty on your demise. So the law constantly is changing to try and stop people from structuring their affairs to avoid those taxes and duties, hence the introduction of the Section 7C. So if I can give you an example, our Joburg office in 2016, because of the number of registrations, we're able to assess how many trusts were registered in the Master's office. Rob, I think it was about 12,600.
Yeah.
After they introduced this new law, the registrations fell off to about 2,500. So it shows you how the change of law spread like wild panic amongst advisors, attorneys, auditors, etc. In that the use of or succession planning is now dead. You can't use a trust. And just to quickly explain the law to you or the attendees is, in the past, prior to 2017, one could make a loan to a trust and you could have an interest-free loan. This new law says that in the event that you do have a loan to a trust, historical or new, post-17, one must now charge interest on this loan. So obviously that is going to spoil the party, because in the past you had interest-free loan. So let's just use around, you've got a 10 million rand loan, you've got to charge the official rate of interest, you've suddenly got 500 grand interest bill, okay? And if you're going to look at the tax on that, it becomes very prohibitive to try and structure your affairs now. Notwithstanding that you're looking at asset protection and other reasons for the structure, they just threw the baby out with the bathwater. So historically, any loan to a trust and future loans to trust will now need to attract interest. If you do not charge interest, the interest that is foregone on that loan is deemed as a donation. So this is a real party spoiler. The fortunate thing, Mark, as you know, we constantly innovate, okay? And there isn't anything that is too complicated that we will not work around. So it does take a while for legislation to be passed. So ordinarily it will start in the budget speech where one of the finance ministers will make some comment. Then they will start furiously working at a white paper, which they circulate to the industry for comment. Based on a comment, they then produce a bill. The bill goes back out and it's to and fro. It takes quite a long period of time, at least between 6 months and a year before it becomes law, which fortunately gives us time to sort of beaver away and look at solutions that are legitimate. Okay, so SARS has put an obstacle in our way. We're going to go left. They close the left route. We're going to go up or down or right or around. So 7C is a problem for many people. However, we have got solutions on how we can still achieve our objectives, which is asset protection and tax efficiencies and succession planning. And 7C hasn't spoiled the party for our clients. The other thing is there are a lot of people who have current 7C problems. And that is absolutely just killing them, because the feedback we've gotten over the last couple of years since the change in law is that, okay, fantastic. I'm sitting with a trust that owns a big asset and I've got a big loan account. And the solution I've been proffered is that you just got to pay the donations tax on the loan, failing which you're going to get fleeced with a tax. Now, Rob mentioned the corporate rules earlier. We've got a great solution whereby we can move the asset and seed the loan and sort out that loan to the trust so we can eliminate the 7C problem. So we have a number of tricks in our bag to solve that problem. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jose. And I know we're getting a lot of queries coming through. We haven't come to the end yet. We've got one more question or two coming. How they can get hold of you guys for trust structures. And I know Twane is on the right chat there. Put the details. Go to the website iProtect.coza. I know there's always, mention on BE. Do you guys want to bring insight into that?
Yes, Mark. Yeah, love it or hate it. We stuck with it. And yes, we understand that it's to redress past injustices. What we see from a business owner's perspective is that people feel slightly aggrieved that they've taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 years. You know what it's like to be in business. You've got to be very brave or absolutely crazy. And then you've, through your blood, sweat, and tears, you've created this baby that you suddenly are being forced to part with or part with some of it. So because of our innovative solutions, people who come kicking and spitting and screaming to our offices to get their BE levels sorted, leave there, whistling and happy as clams, because we found a way on how we can marry the two objectives. One is we got to get your BE sorted because you need it for whatever your business is doing. You need a particular level to do business with a particular party. And in the past, a BE was a bottom-up thing, which meant it was like a self-regulatory sort of exercise, and nobody gave a hoot, and it didn't really work. So government changed the plan, and it's now a top-down exercise. We're doing business with government, doing business with big companies or listed companies or even large entities. They are enforcing it from a top-down perspective by saying, Mike, where is your BE certificate? Because I need procurement points so that I can. Okay, so now there's a sole knock-on effect. But the part that riles most people is giving away equity. And I don't believe in freebies. So we created a number of solutions whereby clients can restructure their businesses. And in a nutshell, if I can just be as simplistic as possible, you sell your business to yourself through a structure without any taxation, okay? Then you introduce the BE party, and then you share with the BE party going forward. But at least what you built up until the point of the BE restructuring has not cost you, and you haven't really given away. But principally, the object or the obstacle to achieve this for most people is that if you sell your equity or your business, okay, you got a capital gains tax problem. And we see this being done incorrectly all the time, which pains us greatly because in many instances, let's say my business is worth 10 million Rand. I've got to get a 25.1% stakeholder, BE stakeholder, 50.1. So now I've sold, let's say 51%. My business is worth 10 million. I started it from scratch. Now I've got to sell 5 million to a BE structure. I, as the owner, have a capital gains tax problem. I may never recoup those funds, but I'm paying tax now. It becomes a very expensive exercise. So the solutions we have tick all the boxes, tick all the BE accreditation and the issue of the certificate, depending on what level they need. But the trick lies in we restructure, there's no tax, okay, and you pretty much have pegged a value, drawn a line in the sand as to what you can extract from the business going forward and what the BE party will share in with you going forward if that happens. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we're coming up to the final question. And again, before we do that, just a big reminder, if you've got any concerns or any queries, a 20-minute chat with two of the most, experienced and trusted trust attorneys in South Africa. Now, all good and well. How do I transfer my home, commercial property, farm, holiday home, investments, business assets, business shareholding to a structure without triggering tax?
Hi, Mike. Thank you. I'll take that one. I think we've covered and we've chopped and changed today in how we can get these current assets in. But there's no doubt that every business owner has different class assets. And our objective is that we've got a set plan on every one of them. Some people believe that you shouldn't move your movables of your home. Believe you me, that if something goes wrong in your business and someone walks in and attaches everything in your house and what's sitting in the garage, what you're protecting is not what they're really worth today. It's the replacement cost of those assets. So we've got solutions via these trust-owned companies to be able to move your movables in there without creating any potential further taxes like loan accounts and the 7C loan account deemed donation taxes that Jose spoke about. So it's a question of getting these assets listed together, getting them through all these book entries into the asset company, creating a class share to me of what they're worth today. We've obviously created solutions via these corporate rules. We've mentioned them before, the Section 42 provisions and our corporate rules of our Tax Act, to be able to move commercial properties without these capital gains tax and VAT, to be able to move residential properties over without transfer duties and capital gains tax. There might be a bit of legal fees involving the property side of things, but at least we don't have the VAT and the CGT and obviously the income taxes, and more importantly, obviously transfer duties on residential property. There are different ways we get policy investments in about what policies are changed involving who pays for it. And for example, imagine you're flowing income correctly from your business and the debit orders of your insurances and the debit orders of your life policies are paid by your asset company. Those premiums have just become 20% cheaper because you have now paid this into your asset company with tax efficient money. Now suddenly I've got more available towards other asset classes because I've structured them correctly. The beneficiary nominations on policies, and how we get investments in like shares and unit trusts without triggering CGT via these corporate rules. So every asset class is going to be different. But what's nice about it is that there's a solution to every asset class of what goes into these asset companies and what don't, like firearms and retirement annuities and anything governed by the Pension Funds Act stays in your name, but they're protected in law anyway. No one can attach it. So it's so quite amusing to find that there's a particular method and a particular solution on every class asset to get them into your various trust-owned companies. And the very few that can't go in are protected in law anyway. And that's the solution. The solution is via these book entries and transfers and corporate rules being utilized. We need to get everything in. It's not a situation that puts some in. It's annoying that people have got some in their name and some in the right structures. The solution here is that, and because maybe they're not aware that you can make use of solutions to get everything in and making sure that everything bought in the right structures going forward. The whole idea here is to make everything owned inside these structures without any form of duties and taxation. And there are solutions to achieve it. We actually stand the test of time. We're probably one of the only companies in Africa that we've put our neck out to say our solution can cause everything to be trust-owned. And we're going to make sure that everything is trust-owned. If there is anything in your name at the end of the day, and you're a client of ours, we'll actually wind up your estate at 0 executive fees. Why? Because it's our responsibility to get everything in. The very little that is going to be outside, we'll wind it up at no executive fees, because our job is to get everything in, and there are solutions to get everything in. And the very little that is out will cause very little to be wound up on your death, and hence to be able to participate that with an executor with very little effort and very cost effectively, even if it's at 0, like our solution provides. So there is solutions where we didn't have them maybe in the past, but every group asset can be moved and secured within these structures, and very, very tax efficiently. And that's the key. It's not only creating it, it's how we get them in at a very low cost, and how we can administer them in the future, and how we acquire assets in the future tax efficiently is what stands a test of time of having the right structure tax efficiently, paying for the running costs easily because of it, and at the same time protecting all our wealth, dying with nothing or very little, and obviously maximizing what we have in our tax acts to add to wealth.
Rob, thank you for that. I see Yaku's on fire this morning. He asks, can the costs of setting up and managing a structure be paid through the business or trust, or is it a personal expense?
Okay, I'll take that, Mike. It depends. Is SARS in the room?
We don't know that.
Okay, so strictly speaking, obviously Section 11 of the Tax Act says for a expense to be tax deductible, it's got to be in the production of income. So you may find that like BE restructuring would fit quite nicely within that narrative. Okay, but by and large, it's the famous sports that gets played in South Africa, and it depends on who your advisors and who your accountants are as to how closely they will link the expenditure to the income of your business. Okay, but strictly speaking, if it's a formation of trust, it generally is the expense of the founder. But everything's negotiable, and by contract and agreement, rather, you can determine who pays for what. But the question of tax deductibility, strictly speaking, it's got to be connected to the income. But then again, how far can you push the envelope, or how far can you push the boundaries without breaking the law? That's it in a nutshell.
I want to add to that is that your asset company is there to pay for certain expenses. And if you can just cause your profits and dividends to flow into that asset company without dividend tax, and already that's a big benefit, that it's cost effective, and at the same time you can use your before dividend tax money at least to pay for some of these expenses, we're doing well.
Rob, thank you for that. Just a question coming through from Tracy. It's quite a good one, I think. And Tracy's asking, what's stopping Treasury SARS from changing the laws around trusts so these structures no longer protect you from tax, etc.?
I think I'll start it, and I think Jose will add to this, is that this is if you're SARS, if you're not utilizing your trust to own assets and make income, they can change all the laws around it. Remember, the trust is not trading. The trust is not making money. The trust is not owning assets anymore. The sole job of the trust is to own the shares of the company. So they can make the tax rates or whatever they want around trusts. They can do whatever they want around the taxation of trusts. The trusts no longer own assets directly compared to the past. Yes, if your trust was owning assets and it was earning income, and now they're changing the rules around trusts and its taxations, you got to maybe have some concerns around it. But remember, this is a company trust structure. The trust's sole job is to own the shares of the company. The company is owning your assets. It has obviously the ability to pay the corporate taxations. It's paying the taxes. We've got very stabilized and very entrenched corporate tax rules. But at the end of the day, because it's a trust-owned company structure, the company is receiving the income. The company is receiving the dividends. And the company is obviously deriving the wealth. So, and because we've got quite a very stabilized corporate tax rules situation, we're quite confident that it stands a test of time. But yes, that could change the rules against trust-owned companies too, because we're not operating trusts, which is a lot more stabilized. And then it's one of those things that as Treasury change, like Jose alluded earlier, you've got to be willing to accept the fact that every decade, every 20 years, as the rules change, as long as you're dealing with professionals in the game, you're going to have to adapt your structure. You know, in the past, a lot of people had assets in trust. Now it's in a company help-out trust, you know, and you've got to adapt it. And who knows what the future holds as laws change, including your own company and your own business through a company. As rules change, you've got to adapt accordingly. But because we're in a situation of a trust-owned company structure, just to answer a question quickly, is that we're not too concerned about what happens around trusts, because the trust must not be earning an income. It must not be really selling. It's the company ahead of it that it owns that is deriving the income and doing the selling and receiving the dividends. Joe?
Yeah, Mark, if I can just chime in and just reply to Tracy's bit of concerns. Firstly, there is nothing stopping Treasury doing anything. In the 25 odd years we've been doing this, remember many of the politicians are also not wanting to pay too much taxation. So they always leave a bit of wriggle room. Okay, so it's do as I say, don't do as I do. And there's always scope for maneuvering. So we see whenever there is changes to the law, it's that they try to say the masses must not participate in these benefits. You know, they leave enough scope that if you have the right advice, you can still achieve the benefits. And that aside, one mustn't lose sight of the objective that it's not always about taxation. Okay, I would, if I had an option, I'd rather pay a little bit more tax and make sure I don't lose my house, my building, my investments. So one shouldn't lose sort of focus of the main goal, which is to get to the end of the game, whenever that may be, and you've always held on to your assets and you've always enjoyed them, that type of thing. Over to you, Mark.
Great, thanks. I've got one more question for you guys from Veronica. You've touched on it earlier. What is the best vehicle then for a sole proprietor?
Well, we'll probably say together there's only one. I mean, if you're a professional, like an attorney or a doctor, it's an incorporation. But if you're not one of those professionals, there's no doubt it's a PDY Limited. We can do so much more in a company. As you're aware, CCs are gone, and you're very limited what you can do with a closed corporation, including that you can't get a holding company to be its member, because only natural persons, and specifically worded trust, can be members of a CC. So to answer the question, unless you're one of those self-employed professionals in the medical and the legal game, which is an incorporation, there's no doubt that a private company is the only entity for business now. You can do so much more in it. You don't have to worry about audits like in the past when you were PDY Limited. And unless you reach a huge amount of turnover in secretariat, you don't have to be audited. So it's an inexpensive structure to run. It's not like the PDY Limiteds of the old days where you had to be audited. It was very expensive. They're pretty inexpensive to manage. There are a lot more tax efficiency. It's like everything else. If I've got the best vehicle to achieve mainly asset protection and estate planning, and I can get a bit of tax efficiencies, which will easily manage the running cost of a company, we're definitely in the route. I think Inc., professionals, PDY Limiteds for every other business owner.
Yeah.
Great. And of course, Jaco, excellent webinar. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Jaco, thank you to you, to Veronica, Matthew, all the guys out there. We have a big audience this morning because it's such an important area. And for some, it might be a little bit daunting, don't let it be. Engage, talk to these guys, they are the professionals. And if you need to know more and you are concerned, or if you want to do the right thing, I always say, if you don't build a solid foundation, you cannot build your castle. And of course, the solution lies with iProtect, Rob Velosa, and Jose Delgado. You guys, I've known you for many years, and I know you've donated your time this morning graciously and without an agenda. And we're very grateful for that. Because of people like you, we can do what we do and to help the playing field out there prosper. And that's the SME sector of South Africa. So, guys, the comments are coming through, as you will see. Awesome comments. And don't forget, to all our attendees, the replays are there. If you've got any questions that I haven't been able to answer, my sincere apologies. We have a big audience, but the replays will come. You will get an email. And as I said to you, if you want to talk to Rob or Jose, iprotect.coza, contact the NSBC. We will put you in touch with these guys. And it's worth a phone call. It's worth a short chat to see where these guys can assist you. And guys, thank you very much. I'm truly grateful, and I've always enjoyed listening. I've done it now probably over 100 times, and I learn every time I listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Take care, guys. All the best,